Micah Baldwin is VP and Chief Evangelist for Legit Networks, a Boulder, Colorado startup, provides publishers a robust search and stats tool. Legit is Micah's 6th startup. That sounds good. Having sold his last startup, Current Wisdom, in the beginning of 2007. I give him a lot of credit for 6 startups. A frequent speaker, you can read more about Micah's philosophy of success through failure at his blog, learntoduck.com. A positive way of thinking, right? We wanted Micah at Big Ohama because of the work he has done in and around the Boulder community, and he's a great example of a person regionally who is pushing the envelope. Micah?
Wow, lots of people. Can everybody hear me? How about now? Let's see if this one works first. Do I do the hand? Is that better? How about now? No? Yeah, I don't like to hear myself either. So, success through failure. Boulder's in the house. So, before we get started, I actually wanted to try something that I haven't done before, which is a little bit of audience participation. Normally, I like to hear myself talk, so I just talk. But this time, I thought we'd try to do something together. And there we go. So it's Friday. Everybody here has a Twitter account? Everybody here has heard of Follow Friday? I figured we should do one collectively. So if you guys want to pull out your phones, send out a tweet. I think Jeff and Dusty definitely deserve a round of applause for doing this. So we should tell the people that they should follow them. So while you're doing that, I'll talk. That way you guys won't see how bad I really am. All right, so when we got started, Jeff asked me, what makes the tech community great? Why does Boulder have 100,000 people in Boulder and 150 startups? What makes it great? And it made me think a lot about that. And sort of the thought that it came up with after talking to people was the idea that we view each success as a community success. And we view each failure as a community failure, meaning our community is more important than the individual startup. Everybody in our community works to help every other startup, whether we're competitive or not. And that's unique, I think, to us. Although talking with some folks, that seems to be the same thing going on here in Omaha, which is awesome. So my thought process after coming up with this was, what does failure mean, right? Which, of course, now you've heard Jason talk, and we're going to have to disagree. So what's failure? So I started to look up what failure was. I started to do a little bit of research, and I started to look up quotes. So in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. You know who said that? Damn it, this thing always should work. There we go. Albert Einstein, right? Then another famous quote, the ultimate measure of a person is not where he or she stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he or she stands at the time of challenge and controversy. Know that one? Martin Luther King. I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work. This one was big. Hey, damn it, you guys steal my thunder. The great thing about this is, notice what he's saying, right? Failure isn't about doing something wrong, right? It's about doing something right. And then, of course, there's this one, which was said by... So failure's a process. That's what it comes out, right? We talk about, if you listen to Jason this morning, this is a standard thing, right? Fail early, fail fast, failure is great, you learn from it. But what people don't talk about is that failure isn't a destination. It isn't a spot that you end on, make changes, and then move from. It's a thing that happens. It's part of the process, right? I didn't go from being 0 to hero. I hate that. From being little to big, that works better. Because I failed and then learned and then failed and then learned and then failed and then learned and then was like, wow, now I'm successful. Failure was just part of the process. It's just something that happens. But then I started thinking as well, is then what's losing? Losing's the actual ending, right? Think about it. You lose a game. I lose my life, right? I lose. Losing's the ending, not failure. So I went on and kept thinking. So I like to do charts, although you'll find very quickly that my charts are useless. So I put together a little grid, y, x-axis. By the way, the 12, 9, I just like those numbers. If you look at very early through late, imagine that being your life, right? Here's my failure curve. Very early, I'm kind of a failure. As I get older, I'm a bigger failure. Hit midlife crisis, become a big failure. I figured that matches for most people. And then I mapped out success. And if you look at most people, success matches their failure rate. Early on, you have some successes, but you fail more often, right? The girl I asked in high school to go to the prom said no. And then as time goes on, right, all of a sudden there's a cross. I start to fail more often and start to succeed the same amount. And then I start to succeed more, and I start to fail more, and then I realize that there's a one-to-one comparison there, so therefore the more I fail, the more I succeed, right? Now let's look at the same chart, but let's look at it as losing or losers and success, right? Again, don't mind the X and Y, other than the work I put into making it diagonal. Here's my loser curve, right? You start off as a loser. As life goes on, you become a bigger loser. By the time you're done, you're an amazing loser. In fact, you're the best thing you've ever been is be a loser. And then we map the success curve. Early on, I'm really successful. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a loser, right? But over time, as I try to get my successes to grow, they fail to grow because my loserness has become an ending for me. I do something, it doesn't work, I go, that's stupid, right? Hey, this little button works too. I go, hey, that's stupid, and I stop. And I try something else. And my success is no longer tied to the actions that I'm taking, it's tied to the actions I don't take, right? I succeed because I'm not a loser. I don't succeed because I am learning and failing and growing. So I actually like, have you guys ever seen these bunnies? They have t-shirts and stuff. It's a great company. They have these really pretty bunnies, and it says things like hi loser. So, and by this point, most people have stopped listening to me, so I wanted to make sure that you all thought I'm talking to you directly, that whole eye contact thing. So here's the next part of our audience participation. This is what I want you to think about. What's worse, right? What would you prefer to be called? What's worse? Born loser. How many people would born loser? Anybody? Ah. What's worse? Right? Born loser. Total failure. What's worse? There's a reason why, and actually really quickly, if you had a choice between born loser and total failure, who prefers born loser? Raise your hand. Total failure. It's interesting. And those that didn't vote, you're both. So I read this really interesting book written by a dude I can't remember, but I'll email everybody, I think his name is Scott, called The History of Failure in America. It's a really cool cover. It's like all these guys and are holding letters, and it spells out failure. But what he said, which I thought was really interesting, is the worst thing in America to be is a loser. Failing's okay. Being a loser is really bad. And if you look at anyone that's been successful, they have failed, right? Which means that to a certain degree, we need to understand what the difference is between failing and losing, right? Failing being a process, something that I do and occurs over time, and a loser is somebody that I am. And that's really the major difference, right? So let's look at the two. MySpace is for losers. Whoa, this button does something too. MySpace is for losers. That statement, although very nicely written with a number 4, is indicating a person, right? Think about that. It's indicating a person. My favorite t-shirt company, I'm wearing my fail threadless shirt, right? That's a mistake. That's something happened, that a mistake was made. That horse isn't a person. And in case you don't know, it's Trojan horse, right? Trojan seahorse. It's a joke. Some of these are really hard to understand. The point here is that it's a mistake. It's an event. It's not a person. Be so much faster if this button worked. There we go. So again, failure is an event. So think about that, right? Think about what Jason talked about this morning, about failing fast, failing often, and how that's not really the way to go, right? If you think about it, he's talking about it as failure as an ending event, as an event that causes something for me to stop, make decisions, and then move on, right? Failure is just something that happens, right? The famous line, right? Shit happens. Shit happens, failure happens, same thing. A loser is a person, right? Again, how many people in this room would rather be called a failure than being called a loser? Me, I'm definitely there, right? I definitely have a lot of people call me a loser, but I certainly prefer failure. The interesting thing is I also wonder whether this is generational. I had this question I asked, probably 500 people in Boulder before I did this, and everybody that I asked that was younger than about 25 said, that's an external thing. That's the way people look at me. If somebody looks at me as a failure, that's on them. If somebody looks at me as a loser, that's on them. I'd rather somebody look at me as a failure than a loser, I guess. We internalize it. Old people, we internalize this. So failure is an event, loser is a person. So then the next important thing here is failing in our DNA. This slide actually has no value other than to show that this is actually my DNA. I love this slide, so I always put it in there. The other cool thing, by the way, is these 3 lines, the second row in, sorry, camera guy, tells whether you're a male or a female, and I was really happy that 3 lines mean male. And the big one in the middle means intelligence, and then the 3 next to it is penis size. So let's talk about failure, right? This is actually the most true statement that has ever been made. My mom taught me everything about failure that I ever needed to know, right? Same thing with all your moms, and hopefully you all have moms, is that failure is a process, right? If at first you don't succeed, try again. That's it. That's how it is. Fail fast, fail early, fail in a circle. It doesn't matter. It's just get through. Get to your direction. Focus on a goal. Go through it. Failure is failure is. That's all it is. It is what it is. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Why don't we like to talk about failure? Because we all get to laugh at the failures, right? Hugh is perfect in this one. So we're afraid to fail. We're afraid to talk about our failures. We're afraid to call it a failure, right? We say things like, it was a learning experience. No, moron, you failed, right? Because we're so afraid of how other people will look at us. We're so afraid of whether we're going to get laughed at for the decisions that we've made, even when that decision leads to something that we didn't want to have happen. That is a failure, when the thing you expect to happen does the opposite. It's also irony if you've ever seen Reality Bites. But what if I fail? We all get to laugh at you. So, with that in mind, let's talk about how to fail properly. By the way, Micah, who pronounces your name incorrectly, that schematic is how to use Yahoo pipes. I just wanted to put that in there for you. 3 easy steps. Step 1, right? Understand that decisions that you make are just decisions. Think of everything along the decision loop, right? So every decision has an outcome. Imagine all the outcomes. The one that you don't want to have happen is failure. It doesn't mean it won't happen, right? Every decision you make has outcomes. The outcome you don't want to have happen is the failure. It's okay if that one happens. Step 1. Step 2. Make sure that your decisions all have measurable outcomes. If you fail, know what that failure has caused you. If you make a decision where the outcome is not what you want it to do, make sure that you know why that is the way it is. Measure it, right? You know what a great example of this is, by the way, for all you guys that are single, like me, is watch guys in a club talk to women. They'll go up and they'll be like, hey, lady, how you doing? Right? And that woman will walk away, and they'll go up to the next one and they'll go, hello, miss, how are you? Right? And they'll continue to do it until they find what they want to do, because everything has a measured response, right? Step 2, make sure it's measurable. Step 3, oop, too fast. Anticipate, right? Anticipate. I changed this last night from learn to anticipate, just because I don't want Jason thinking that he's right. But if you can anticipate the outcomes of what you're going to do, and if you can understand and measure where everything is going to go, you can anticipate your next step. If failure is just a process, it's just about steps on a path. If you make a decision and an outcome occurs that you don't want to have happen, and you can measure it, you can always, always, always anticipate what your next step should be. And that's what failure is at the end of the day. That's the value of it, right? Is I make a decision, the decision turns out badly, I can measure why it turned out badly, and because I know why it was bad, I know what to do next. That's why people say fail fast, because they want you to figure that out quickly, right? When VCs invest in you, they don't invest in you because they think you're cool, right? They want to make money. There is no other thing than they want to make money. And they'd like to make money faster than slower, and they'd like to make more than less, right? So if you're gonna fuck up their money, they want you to do it fast. So here's my quote, my favorite quote. And said by me. And just in case you don't like my whole, I put a little pretty, that's my dog and me when I was a kid. Yeah, see? That way, if you hate me, at least you like the picture. And that's it. If you wanted to get in touch with me, here's all the ways. The third one down is a startup I'm working on now called Context. Text Miha, M-I-C-A-H, to 5500. You'll get all my contact information. Fun little startup. It probably won't work, so you can tell me that it didn't work. There's my Twitter, which, yeah, Micah, I own. And at the very bottom is my mom's number. That is actually my mom's number. She actually gets mad at me for doing this because now people apparently are calling her. And
is she single?
She is not single,
oh, okay.
depending on the day.
Oh.
And I did start Follow Friday, which if anybody wants to know about, we can talk about.
You are so cool.
Yeah. So that's me. Thank you.
If you have questions, come. First, I want to say I've never seen so many animals in a slideshow for a tech conference. And my mom, the advice she gave me was to marry a lawyer, but I don't know.
How'd that work out?
I'm still single. Does anyone have any questions for Miha? Step up to the mic. So what was the first inspiration when you realized this whole failure analogy for you?
I do failure well and often. And so I think over time it was important to understand. It's interesting. So my father said this to me when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. He said the difference between you and your sister is that you see failure as a process and they see it as an ending. And so for me, it was always figuring out what that meant. So I've spent the last 20 years trying to understand what he means by it being a process. And I think at the end of the day, real entrepreneurs understand that failure is just failure. And they don't dwell on it in the same way.
All right, first question.
So I didn't really hear you say any or identify any individual failures. So I guess I'm just going to ask, what's your most epic, brutal failure, and what'd you learn from that?
So if you were to ask my mother, it's that I'm 37 and single. My most epic failure, and I think this is actually a good transition into what we're going to talk about later, is when I started Current Wisdom, we made a ton of money, retarded amounts of money, like more money, like we could swim in it money. And instead of doing the smart thing and save it and do positive things, I became a massive drug addict. So I went and spent weekends in Vegas and spent lots of money and did all the awful things you could ever imagine a person doing. I've done, which is great because now my kids can't, if I ever have them, will never be able to outdo me. So that probably was my most epic failure. And in all honesty, the positive out of that was you cannot know, not to be all melodramatic, right? You can't know darkness unless you live darkness, right? So it's the same story. You can't know true failure until you get fired, until your company fails, right? Until you wake up in a pool of your own vomit, that kind of thing. So that never happened to me, by the way. I moved to the left.
I like your honest. No, you know what? I appreciate it. I must say, out of all these speakers, I appreciate your honesty.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, next question.
Yes, do you write down your failures or successes, and would you encourage or discourage that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
I said, do you write down, keep a journal of your failures and successes, and would you discourage or encourage it?
Are you a diary
journaling.
man?
Yeah, so short answer is no in terms of journaling. Long answer, yes, I encourage it. Third, blogging changed my life. So I'm such a big fan of Matt Mullenweg, and I've become a good friend of his, is because I didn't start blogging until the middle of 2007. I sold my company, I didn't know what to do next, so I started to blog. And from blogging, I'm standing here now. From blogging, I know Jeffrey and Gary, and from blogging, I know a million people that have taught me a million things. And the number one shift was the moment I wrote a blog post about my biggest about failing. Not about the drug stuff, but about other stuff, right? I wrote about failing, and it was an immediately positive response. Like when I started to blog, I wanted to blog about weight loss, right? Which clearly hasn't been so positive. And I was like, oh, this fat blogging thing, Jason Calcanis, blah, blah, blah. And he'll link to me, and I'll learn all this cool stuff, and he never did. But nothing, right? Nothing came from that until I started to talk about myself. So I journal in a very open way, like on my blog, and nothing is hidden, right? My mom calls me and goes, please delete that. And I go, sorry, Mom, you're wrong. And so yes, I do believe in journaling, but I believe in journaling openly. Failure is to be shared.
Does your mom have a blog?
She doesn't, but she's on Facebook. I tried to get her off Facebook by posting really bad pictures of her. It's a true story. And she would email me and go, Miha, take those pictures down. I go, get off Facebook and we'll do it. But it doesn't happen. So now what happens is like, and I'm Jewish, I have a Jewish mom, so any Jews in the house, you know how this goes. I get a call, Miha, I read your Facebook. It said that you were sad. Are you happy now? Yeah.
I'm seeing a reality
Mom,
series online, Miha and Mom.
It's hilarious. So, anyway, but yeah.
All right, next question.
You talked about measures.
Uh-huh.
Do you set your measures and metrics while you're working on the project, and then you have something to evaluate if it fails, or do you only look at those measures and metrics once you fail?
So there's two levels of measurement, right? One measure is the overall project, and one is individual actions. I tend to look at every it's the whole, every action has equal and opposite reaction. So every action has an outcome, therefore I should be able to track that. And what's interesting to me, the biggest mistake I ever made was not coming up with getting things done, or Behance or 37 Signals or any of these type of companies that really help you to do a better job of project manage, because that's really all they are, right? Action, action, reaction, outcome. What did I learn? What's next? Lay it out. So yeah, I measure everything.
So that infers you're measuring your successes.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Those are large.
Just like your DNA.
That's right. Just like my DNA. Yeah.
Yeah, so that segs nicely into my question. What's your most amazing kick-ass success in your opinion?
So my biggest success, I played lacrosse for 18 years, and I've been coaching for about 15. And I once coached a team first year in California. They were a varsity program they were a varsity program the year before. In their final game, before I started coaching them, the cops were called, and they had to do push-ups, and they ended the season 3-9. And my biggest success was turning those guys into a 10-3 team and one game away from the finals. That's my biggest success, by far.
Failure can be like a motivation killer. I just wonder if there are any strategies you suggest specifically to power through the failure that you...
To power through failure?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an ending. Like, think about it. Like, that by itself is the most motivating thing ever. I was going to tell a story, right, in which you gave me a great opening for. I'm reading a really interesting book called Know It All by A.J. Jacobs, where he literally reads the entire encyclopedia from A to Z. And in there, there's this quick story, and I'll do it super fast, which is a Middle Eastern king says to his wise men, I want to put together all the world's knowledge, right? And so they went away for a year, came back and said, here's 25 volumes. And they said, it's too long, too many. I can't read that much. Give me less. So they went away for a year, and they came back, and they gave him 1 volume, right? And he said, too much. I'm a king. I don't need all this. And so they went back, they came back for a year, and they handed him a piece of paper with a single sentence on it. And you know what that sentence was? This too shall pass, right? That's failure. It doesn't last forever. Being a loser does.
How do you decide what projects or companies you want to start up when you've been through so much failure? How do you know that this is the right one to put your energy into?
So I hate that question because
Sorry.
Yeah.
I ask the hard questions.
Yeah. Well, because, you know, at the end of the day, you get to know, right? Like, over life, you know that if you see a pepper and you eat it, it's going to be hot, and that, for me, it makes my stomach hurt, right? So over time, you see the same thing in projects or ideas or companies, is your gut tells you, right? And I think that the number one thing that people do as they get older is they stop listening to their own stomachs, right? And for me, that's it. If my stomach says I should do it, then I do it. Obviously, it leads me in my life, so, you know, my stomach's sort of a driving
in terms
force.
of getting the money from investors, does it help you or not help you when you've had previous failures?
Depends on the investor. Some investors like people that have been through the war and have done well and done badly. I think at the end of the day, investors still believe in the concept of the money that I give should make more money. Can this person make more money, right? And so the idea is only half of it. The other half of it is the people making the idea and organizing the idea. So what I do a lot of is I talk to people and I ask people whether this is a problem for them or is it a problem for me, right? So if it's something that bothers me, like, I'm not a developer at all. I have this great idea. I'm not a developer at all. What I'd love to be able to do in WordPress is be able to find a list of features and another list of features and then create my own super plugin, my Micah plugin, and put it in and have it do all that stuff. And everybody I ask that is a developer says, that's really hard. I go, great, because if it's hard, not impossible, it means it can be done. I ask every investor, I go, would you put money into that? And they all say, no, it's an interesting project, it's not a business. So over time, you start to learn. You get to understand, and you understand that when they say it's not a business doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. It just means that they're not going to give you money.
We have more questions.
Mine is actually just more of an observation. So between you and Jason, you kind of have, you would think you're having presentations that are contradicting, but I think it's a little different, and I want to see if you would agree with this. But so his presentation was don't have a plan, right? So you don't have to have a plan to do things. And yours is about failure. So what I think the bigger point is, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, is you shouldn't stunt yourself on trying to have a plan to get out there and try things out. It's okay to fail, and I don't agree with not having a plan. Jason has a plan. There is a plan. They don't just sit and start building things aimlessly in the dark. But what he's saying is don't get hinged on that. And I think what you're saying is failure's okay, and get out there and do it fast. That's fine. Stick to the plan, and then reorganize and keep planning out what the next step is. So I think that's kind of my takeaway. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So I always say that there's two types of entrepreneurs in the world, right? There's the one that walks to the cliff and makes sure his chute is packed and it's going to open and everything else, and there's somebody else who jumps and tries to figure it out as they go. I think Jason's that second person, right? Just go. You'll figure it out, right? You didn't become an entrepreneur. You didn't come to this conference because you're dumb, right? You came here because you have some level of intelligence that you can put A plus B and create C. So I'm a firm believer in the same thing, is just do it. Right? There's a reason why that slogan became such a big slogan, because it resonates with everybody. Should you plan? I don't know. I believe in micro plans, right? I believe in an A to a B and a B to a C, but I'm not going to tell you A to Z because I have no idea. But the other difference, I think, and this is the part that I think Jason and I would agree on, is that it's not about planning or not planning. It's about being open to the reality that your plan may change, right? So that everything you do, if I'm going to go after I'm done here, I'm going to go get a Red Bull and cola and a fruit roll-up, and they don't have fruit roll-ups, then I'm going to go and walk and find a, fruit nut bar or something. Like, that's okay. My life's changed. My world hasn't fallen apart because the fruit roll-ups are gone. Don't eat all the fruit roll-ups. I love fruit roll-ups. But, do you know what I mean? That's the reality, is that your plans are open for change and should be malleable based upon the situations that you have in front of you. I think that's what not planning means.
All right. Want to go?
Hi, my name is Ann Good. I have agoutloud.com for a daily dog blog. I'm
Awesome.
passionate about changing the dog world, how people get and also own dogs responsibly while having some fun. But anyway, I love that you talked about how you are very open about everything and how transparency is important when you're blogging, as am I. But my question with that is, I don't know if this is fair to say that I'm a girl, but just how I am, I'm an open book, but I'm also sensitive.
Right.
And how do you then develop a hard skin when people do judge you, when you do have an opinion and people come at you, or you are very open about personal things like I'm pregnant right now and emotional and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
How do you then deal with that?
So I own 2 dogs and 3 cats because I'm 37 and single, but it's awesome. I should be Jason's mascot. I'm 37. I could just write signals on my shirt. I came to this realization, right? So obviously drug abuse, sobriety, blah, blah, blah. I was walking down the street in Boulder, right? And somebody was saying about how they disliked something that I said. And my reaction, which was never the way I reacted before, was, you know what? That's your thing. I can just live my own life and I can just be who I am. You cannot change the fact that I started a company or I, hung out with Brian Urlacher in Vegas or that I'm 300 pounds. Like, you can't change any of that. Only I can do that. So what you view me as, that's your issue, right? That's how I deal with it. So I don't care. I really don't.
Yeah, thank you. Send pictures of your dogs in.
Yeah, they're on my blog.
All right, one more question.
So, like, when you have an idea or you're getting ready to start something, and you started 6 companies, ideas are those kind of things that they float in and out, and sometimes you're really inspired and sometimes you're not. And I think a lot of us have really great ideas, but then they just kind of go out the door because we get pounded down by, we could fail or this could happen. And so I'm just curious for you, like, what is your best tool to keeping that light bulb turned on and keeping it alive and kind of keeping the idea that it could fail down so that you have the momentum to actually see it through?
Find a friend. Find somebody that you can bounce an idea off of that is probably as opposite and different as you, of you, that you are. So, and like, I'm an idea person. I can't do stuff very well. I kind of come up with stuff and then talk about it. So I have a friend who's a doer. So I'll be like, hey dude, can we do this? And he'll be like, no dude. And I'll be like, okay. How about this? And he'll be like, no dude. And then finally when he says yes, I go, there we go. Let's do that one. So that's how I do it.
It's also about acknowledging what you're good at.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you so much, Micah.
Thank you.
Radical.